Hi friends, we're in my garage today because personal friends of mine that are beginner and intermediate painters like myself have serious concerns about solvents. Now, one of the themes of this channel is that I go to classes and I share what I learn. And in a recent class at our local gaming convention, I learned a lot about oil paints on miniatures, and the primary barrier that my friends have about using oil paints on miniatures is the solvent. Because once we overcome our barriers with the solvent, you'll be able to add this powerful tool to your toolkit, and I'm going to show you how I got a bang-up job using oil paints to speed paint this miniature. That's right, you can get good results with oil paints fast, but before we dive into that, let's overcome our barriers with the solvents. Now, to get your feet wet, you're going to want to buy something like this. It's a small bottle of solvent, also known as Odorless White Spirit. Whatever you call it, it's a powerful tool to help thin your paints and get fast drying washes out of your oil paints. Basically, the more of this stuff you blend into the oil paint, the faster it's going to dry. Okay, real quick, I wanted to show you guys, this is the palette we used on this project, and this is all we needed, and I'm going to get rid of the aluminum foil now because that is the disposable part. Now, each of these divots come in handy for mixing up oil washes for each color that you might want to. And this is all the colors I used for this project. Little blending area in the middle. This type of palette is ideal. So we're going to start fresh, piece of aluminum foil, and don't just come straight down on it because you'll make holes and tears and that defeats the purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to feed and just rotate and feed and rotate and feed and rotate. So we're building up some slack so we can get into the divots, so without causing too much rips. And once it gets to a certain point, just fold it down and back, and then we can define our divots a bit more. Don't press down too hard, you still might rip some. We only need a slight divot. So these divots are great because they'll hold about 3 or 4 milliliters of solvent, which is perfect for a typical oil wash. Done. And cheap. Okay, the problem is what most people do is they'll be enjoying their oil paints and they'll have a wash going on, and it's time to do something else, time to move on to another color, and they'll do this. All right? No, that's wrong, my friends. You absolutely do not want to do that. If you do that more than a couple times, you'll see you're tainting a whole lot of solvent in a very little amount of time. After 3 or 4 brush cleanings, you're going to think you're going to dispose of that solvent. That is very wasteful. Or you might cap it, keep it for a while, let the pigment settle to the bottom, and then continue doing this bad habit. Either way, that's wrong. So that approach is wasteful and exposes you to a lot more fumes of this solvent. So what you want to do is come in with about 1 milliliter of solvent and use a vacant divot on your palette. Keeping the main container closed reduces evaporation and fumes in your area. Always do this in a well-ventilated area. So you've been enjoying your paints and you've been doing your wash, and it's now time to get the brush to another color. So what you're going to do is just dip and white, dip and white, dip and white. And once you get to that point, you're able to just continue on to another color, or you can set the brush aside for washing with brush soap later. After washing with brush soap, you'll be good to go for either acrylics or oil paint. Because after washing the brush 2 or 3 times with the Master's Brush Cleaner and Preserver brush soap, it'll be good to go for further oil painting, or you can go back to acrylics. It's that good. Now, as we all know, even though it's odorless mineral spirit, long-term exposure to the fumes is a toxic hazard. We know this for a fact. Rest in peace, buddy. So, of course, always use your mineral spirits in a well-ventilated area. I'm lucky I have a window next to my workspace, and there's airflow taking the fumes out, and that's where I put the cleaning cloths and paper towels that I have put solvent on. So using this approach will minimize your exposure to the fumes and is fine for getting your feet wet. But you can see the weakness in this approach right away. As soon as you use 1 or 2 millimeters for a wash or 1 or 2 millimeters to clean your brush, those are gone. Those few millimeters will evaporate each time. Even so, you'll find one of these starter bottles will last quite some time, several projects for sure. So once you figured out how fun oil paints are and want to take it to the next level, you're going to get one of these, and these are on sale at Michael's from time to time. I got this one at 40% off. Keep an eye out for coupons. You can always get bargains. This is a 32-ounce bottle of solvent, and it is essentially a lifetime supply if you're just doing miniatures. Now, along with that, you're going to get one of these tins. They're about $10. There's a good seal, and they clamp down. They prevent evaporation of your mineral spirits. And again, that helps reduce your exposure. Now, you don't want to get into the habit of dipping your brush and cleaning it in here. You're going to dip and clean on the cloth. Dip and clean on the cloth. That way, this solution will last a very long time. I only occasionally have to refresh it with a few millimeters to take into account the evaporation, but this is a great way to save solvent. So this is a great way to up your game. Once you have one of these, you're going to be using minimal solvent and you'll have minimal exposure. The very little pigments that will get in here will settle down to the bottom, and you may not ever have to deal with them for years. But at some point, what you'll do is carefully pour this off into a larger container until there's just the sludge of pigments at the bottom, and that will be disposed of properly. Now that we've broken the barrier of solvents, let's dive into how I do speed painting with oil paints. First, a little prep work. There was a significant gap between the head and the body, easily filled with plastic putty. Just work it into the gap, dry it with a blow dryer, and when it's dry, scrape off the excess with a hobby knife. Just scrape in the same direction of the fur, and this gap will become invisible. After priming gray, we can't see it at all. Using the airbrush, I want to get an idea of some lighting. I often use the airbrush to prep before oil paints because oil paints tend to be transparent, so you get to retain all that information you're building up. That's information about where the light is coming from, where the shadows are. Then I want to undershoot the model with some blue to cool it down some, because we're definitely going to be putting this animal on an Arctic base. That brings you up to something like this. You've got a bright zenithal and some blue undershading. We are ready for oil paints. This is our go-to palette for oil paints. They're cheap. You can get them at any art supply store. And we're not going to use it individually and dispose of it. We are going to wrap it with aluminum foil, and the foil will be disposable. Now that the palette has foil, we can put down our base color. Transparent red oxide is a great base color choice for most four-legged animals that are predominantly brown. Once I've applied my base coat, I go around patiently and smooth everything out with a filbert brush. Filbert brushes are great for oil painting. You'll want to have several and of different sizes. The idea is to smooth out any clumps or puddles of the oil paint and get everything to a smooth, thin finish. Once that's done, we can go crazy and have fun with colors. The basic process is stipple and blend, stipple and blend, stipple and blend, and is that easy. You don't even need a brush to do the stipple. I'm using a wooden stick. It's a coffee stirrer. It's disposable and it does the job, and you save having to clean it. The smoothing and blending brush I am wiping very often on a paper towel. And in general, that is the only cleaning you need to do on the filbert brush for this step. As you can see here, I'm going for another color, this time a dark blue, and all I want to do is keep the darker colors towards the shadows in the lower parts of the model and the brighter colors closer to the top and the back of the model, saving the brightest colors for the head and spine area. I've only used 3 colors so far, and it's starting to look beautiful already because of all the smooth blending that is going on. Now I want to add a lighter color, this light tan type of color, and I want to keep that around the mid-range of the model, the middle points of the model. Not high and not low, but somewhere in the middle. And again, the process is the same. Stipple with a stick, which is disposable, and blend with your filbert brush, which I am constantly wiping on a paper towel. If you do it this way, with this process, you will use a minimum amount of solvent and minimize your exposure to the fumes of it. Now it's time to add some final highlights to the fur by stippling in some titanium white. You might have noticed that as we go brighter in color, we go less stippling, less blending with that color. The final highlight being white, we want to stipple a little bit and blend just a little bit and concentrate the white where we think we are reflecting the most light. Blending these small stipples of white usually just requires a light touch or two with your filbert brush. If you don't put enough, just add some more. If you put a little too much, no problem. Use your cleanup brush and maybe an extra touch of white spirit and mop it right up. It's a very forgiving process, great for beginners, and it leaves you with perfectly smooth blends. Just wanted to take a moment to appreciate all the colors we've got going on in the fur. It took very little brush work to get up to this point, and I'm quite pleased with it, as this is a creature of both forest and water. And now it's time to work on the antlers, and I started with this wonderful brown color, Moist Soil, from the Scale 75 Flow series of oil paints. It's a wonderful rich dark brown, and that will establish the base of our antler branches. And of course, it's stippling and smoothing, stippling and smoothing. We want to be a little bit neat here because we know some of this antler sculpting is going to be water. So I couldn't do all this in one session, so between sessions I simply put a Ziploc over the model, and that helped keep the already slow drying oil paints very slick for my next session. Now it's time to whip up an oil paint version of Speed Paint using 1 milliliter of white spirit. So of course we're doing this in a well-ventilated area. Now this is where the little divots in the palette come in handy. We can basically make a wash of any of the colors we like. Now we're just going to apply this speed paint style into the sculpture within the antlers, where the idea is that the antlers are generating magically this water. You want to try and be neat here because the blue will stain that brown around the antlers very dark. Now we get to happily apply our oil paints much like we would apply speed paints. You know, when I first cracked open speed paints about 3 years ago, my reaction was, hey, they finally came up with acrylic paints that work like oil paints. Now let's take a moment to appreciate how far we've gotten in how little time. We are speed painting with oil paints. Our base colors are down, we just need to develop some more detail. Let's continue on with the face. Truth be told, I messed up on the face several times, but I still maintain doing eyes and the face with oil paints is easier. Even though I messed up, I was able to quickly mop up my mistakes with white spirit and continue on. Now I want to add some color to the base of the antlers, so I'm going to make a quick wash here of the transparent red oxide. I'm just using a few drops of white spirit and a little bit of paint, so it will dry pretty quick. Now when these thin oil washes are dry, and they dry pretty quick with the help of a blow dryer, they are permanent, they will not reactivate, so you can build up thin layers of color and it looks really nice. So we mixed a little of the brown with the red oxide, and now we're just dabbing that on the main part of the antlers, and we're going to smooth it out for our base color there. I get the paper towel handy close by because I'm going to be using it a lot. And out comes the trusty filbert brush to do the smoothing. You're going to want to collect a few filbert brushes of different sizes. Fortunately, they can all be had very cheap because that's the most popular shape for makeup brushes. I'm going to speed through this section a little bit because it's just smoothing and wiping, smoothing and wiping, smoothing and wiping. And when I say smooth, I mean really smooth. You leave no brush marks at all. I'm telling you right now, oil paints will up your game. The base coat is still really slick, so if you wanted to stipple and blend more colors in, no problem. I elected to let the paint settle overnight and then do some stippling to add some texture, and that was pretty much it. For basing Mythic Battles Ragnarok, I'm having a ton of fun with the Arctic basing set from Green Stuff World. You get a dozen products that are just fun to experiment with and give you all kinds of icy bone-chilling effects. For this base, I wanted a combination of static grass and splash gel and snow and some water effects. But what really set it off was some liquid frost, and here's the time lapse showing the liquid frost growing the interesting salt crystals on the base. Okay friends, so check this out. This is way better than I could get with my regular slap chop. And we're looking about 2 hours to get all the base colors down and another 2 hours of fiddling with details and the basing. So hang on to your hats because we're going to go through the complete list of everything you need to get into this. and I am sure you will enjoy upping your game with oil paints. Okay, my friends, to add oil paints to your arsenal of tools, you're going to need a few things. I have links to everything in the description. Friends, that was a strong chapter in our epic quest to speed paint all of Mythic Battles Ragnarok. If you haven't done so yet, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you haven't seen the epic unboxing where we preview all the models of Mythic Battles Ragnarok, check the link there, and we'll see you next time. Hey, glad you stuck around. This is a picture of Eikthryrnir on the game board. His name was pronounced Eikthryrnir. You got to get the behind the Eikthryrnir. Yeah, go Vikings.